So now we're on to key issue 4 of chapter 2. And so basically what we're talking about today is the epidemiologic transition. Okay, this is very, very, very similar to the demographic transition, which we talked about in key issue 3. The biggest difference here is that rather than talking about demography and people, we're talking about disease. Okay, however, the stages correspond directly to the demographic transition. So stage 1, as you'll remember, we talked about stage 1, no one is in stage 1. So pestilence and famine, this is the bubonic plague, this is all of those kinds of like terrible diseases, they don't exist anymore. And the primary reason is because the same reason we're not in stage 1 anymore, which is the medical revolution. All right, the medical revolution has prevented us from being in stage 1 anymore, so we don't have to deal with those problems. However, stage 2, receding pandemics. Okay, this is stage 2 again. So we're talking about sub-Saharan Africa, that area that's lit up super red. Okay, so we're talking about, in this, we're talking about AIDS, we're talking about, cholera, we're talking about all of those kinds of diseases that can spread due to just a general lack of education and all of those kinds of things. Okay, so that's stage 2. Now stage 3 gets into degenerative diseases. Okay, and so degenerative diseases are basically just exactly what it sounds like. These are things where you degenerate over time. Okay, so basically human bodies aren't meant to last as long as we are having them last now, and so things like heart attacks, cardiovascular diseases, all of those kinds of things are what happens in stage 3. Okay, stage 4 is your delayed degenerative diseases. These are your cancers, your Alzheimer's, where basically at that point human bodies are definitely not meant to live that long, and so they're going to just start to fall apart. Think about it like a car, right? The longer you have a car, the more likely it is that something's going to go wrong, and that's the same way that it is with human beings. All right. Then we talk about infectious diseases, reasons for stage 5. Okay, and so this is just like stage 5 in the demographic transition, where basically we've gotten to the point where stage 4, we've been in long enough that diseases are starting to figure us out. And so one reason for a potential for stage 5 could be evolution of disease. Another reason could be poverty, that growing wealth gap, and all of these countries. If we're in stage 5 and we've got a significantly impoverished population, they're not going to be able to deal with potentially evolved forms of diseases. Okay, the next one is increased connections. This is basically thanks to not the Industrial Revolution, but now we're talking about the technological revolution. Okay, people are able to go from place to place a lot more often, and so that's what you're going to see on page 69 with the spread of AIDS. You're going to see that this is happening predominantly in areas where there are large airports, okay, large international airports. So people are coming in to the United States with AIDS. They're landing in these places. They're spreading it in these places, and then due to increased connections, they're able to spread it all over the world. Okay. Indicators of health. This is super, super important. So you definitely want to know the way that you show that you have decent health in your country is to have a low infant mortality rate. This is basically just the number of infants who die per 1,000 people. Okay, so you want that to be as low as you can. So when you look at this, again, you're going to see Africa lit up like a Christmas tree, and then you're going to have the United States, Western Europe, and Australia not be lit up very much at all. Okay, however, life expectancy at birth in years, the United States is again lit up, Western Europe, Australia, but now we see Africa is not. Okay, this is just the way that you show healthcare and all that kind of stuff. It's super important. It makes a huge difference in the way a country runs, and so you definitely want to make sure that you've got indicators of health, provision of healthcare, etc. down. All right, medical services are sort of the last thing that we're going to talk about with this chapter, and just basically make sure that you summarize this down. I don't want like more than 3 or 4 sentences here, but just take these paragraphs, summarize them down. We're looking, again, these maps are just trying to show, how many doctors you have, how many hospital beds you have per 10,000 people in your country. And again, you see the super developed countries, the countries that are in stage 4, your Western Europes, your Australias, your United States, they're lit up, okay? But your lower developed nations, your sub-Saharan Africas, some of your places in South America, aren't lit up as well. So that's basically all you need to get from key issue 4. Make sure that you look at this overpopulation in sub-Saharan Africa a little bit. You don't need to take notes over it, but get a decent idea for it, because anytime there's examples in the book, they're going to help you remember it a little bit better. So just as a quick reminder of what we went over in this key issue, we talked about the different stages and how they correspond to the demographic transition. We talked about potential reasons for stage 5. We talked about increased connections and how that led to the spread of AIDS. We talked about indicators of health and healthcare, etc. And that's basically all we talked about. So make sure that you guys take good notes, and I will see you for the quizzes.